27 years. That's how long one man spent behind bars. Not for a crime of violence, not for greed, but for a dream of equality. A dream that one day, black and white would stand side by side, not as enemies, but as equals. For most of us, 27 years would mean a lifetime lost. For Nelson Mandela, it was a lifetime built. He walked into prison as a man with broken chains around his people and walked out as a symbol who broke the chains of a nation. This is not just the story of a leader. This is the story of a soul that refused to surrender. This is the story of Nelson Mandela. He was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village called Mvizo, South Africa. A world of rolling hills, dusty roads, and tribal traditions. His father, a respected chief, taught him dignity and courage, values that would one day guide an entire nation. But life changed quickly. His father passed away when Mandela was just 9. He was adopted by a local royal family, and that's where he first saw leadership up close. As a child, Mandela would listen to elders telling stories about African warriors who resisted colonial rule. He dreamed not of power, but of justice. Of a world where no one lived as less than another. When he grew older, he attended missionary schools and later Fort Hare University, one of the few places where black South Africans could get higher education. There, he learned discipline, but also rebellion. He questioned authority. He stood up against unfair rules. And when he was expelled for joining a student protest, Mandela didn't regret it. He had found something far more important than a degree. He had found his voice. Years later, in the bustling city of Johannesburg, Mandela worked as a law clerk by day and studied law by night. It was here he came face to face with the true face of apartheid, a system that legalized racism, dividing the land by color. Whites had power. Blacks had silence. Mandela couldn't stay silent. He joined the African National Congress, the ANC, a movement fighting for the rights of black South Africans. At first, their struggle was peaceful. Petitions, protests, speeches filled with hope. But the government responded with violence, bullets, and prison cells. And so Mandela's fight changed too. He helped form Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, an armed wing of the ANC. He didn't seek war. He sought to wake up a sleeping world. But to the apartheid regime, he became the enemy of the state. In 1962, he was arrested and sentenced to 5 years for leaving the country illegally. 2 years later came the Rivonia trial, a trial that would change his life forever. Standing in the courtroom, facing the death penalty, Mandela spoke words that shook history. "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." He was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was 46 years old. Robben Island, a place meant to break men. A barren rock surrounded by endless sea. Here, Mandela spent 18 of his 27 years in captivity. He slept on a thin mat on a stone floor. He labored in the quarry, breaking rocks under a burning sun. He was allowed one visitor every 6 months. He wrote one letter every 6 months. But in that silence he found strength. He read, he studied. He listened. He turned the prison into a university. He taught younger inmates law, politics, and forgiveness. He refused to let hatred live inside him. When his guards insulted him, he greeted them with respect. When they tried to humiliate him, he stood taller. And slowly, even his enemies began to admire his dignity. Mandela believed that true freedom begins not in the world around you, but in the mind within you. He refused to let the bars define him. He refused to let anger destroy him. Outside, the world was changing. Protests erupted across continents. Free Nelson Mandela became a global cry for justice. And inside that tiny cell, a 70-year-old man waited not for revenge, but for the right moment to forgive. In 1990, that moment came. The apartheid regime, under growing pressure, finally opened the prison gates. Nelson Mandela walked out after 27 years, holding the hand of his wife, Winnie. The world watched, silent, emotional, and in awe. He could have walked out angry. He could have called for blood. Instead, he called for peace. He said, "As I walked toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." Those words defined him. Because Mandela understood something few leaders ever do, that forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength in its purest form. 4 years later, in 1994, history was made. For the first time, black and white South Africans stood in the same line to vote. Some had waited their whole lives for this moment. And when the results came in, the world witnessed the impossible. Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. He entered office not as a ruler, but as a reconciler. He invited his former jailers to his inauguration. He built a government that included both black and white ministers. He pushed for unity in a land torn apart by centuries of hatred. He often said, "If you want to make peace with your enemy, you must work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner." He transformed bitterness into brotherhood, anger into alliance. During the Rugby World Cup of 1995, Mandela wore the jersey of the all-white South African team, a small act that united an entire nation. In that moment, the stadium erupted in one voice. And the world realized that South Africa was healing. But even as president, Mandela's journey wasn't easy. He faced corruption, political infighting, and the enormous task of rebuilding a broken country. There were nights he couldn't sleep, haunted by the memory of lost friends and decades of injustice. He was a symbol to the world, but he was still human, a man with scars the world could not see. And yet, he kept moving forward. He chose compassion over convenience. He chose peace over pride. And when his term ended, he did something few politicians ever do. He stepped down willingly. He could have stayed. He could have ruled for life. But Mandela understood something deeper, that true power lies not in holding on, but in letting go. He once said, "I have walked that long road to freedom. I've tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret, that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." Even in retirement, he remained the moral compass of a world still searching for justice. He spoke against poverty, against war, against hate. Leaders called him Madiba, a name that carried not just respect, but love. In 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 95. When the news broke, the world stood still. Millions mourned not just a man, but a movement. They wept because they knew that in him, humanity had seen its best self. He once said, "When a man has done what he considers to be his duty to his people and his country, he can rest in peace." And Nelson Mandela did exactly that. He left behind a country still imperfect, but alive with hope. He left behind a legacy that proved no prison can hold the spirit of a free man. Nelson Mandela's story is a mirror to us all. He reminds us that change doesn't begin with power, it begins with purpose. That forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it transforms it. That one man's courage can awaken the conscience of an entire world. He walked into prison with dreams in chains, and walked out with a dream that set his nation free. He showed us that true leadership isn't about ruling over others, but rising above ourselves. Nelson Mandela's name will live forever, not carved in stone, but written in the hearts of those who still believe that peace is worth fighting for. He may be gone, but his legacy still breathes in every act of kindness, every moment of courage, and every voice that dares to speak truth to power. Which part of his journey touched you the most? What would you have done if you were in his place? If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories from around the world.